It will keep the temperatures a bit higher compared with the previous night. Still, potential for some single-figure temperatures as we start off Thursday in the south and the north, but in between, areas of cloud, showers moving across northern England into southern Scotland as well. The rain tending to ease later, brighter skies coming along, and temperatures still reaching the mid-20s in the south, high teens and around 20 Celsius at best for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Further showers drifting north into central and southern Scotland during Thursday evening. Clear spells breaking out for Northern Ireland, Wales, central and southern England, as well as the far north of Scotland. And then Friday brings with it further showers in the north and west. And Saturday and Sunday it turns warmer in the south.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
And welcome once again to On the Money, where we're focused on the UK's cost of living crisis, helping you to beat the squeeze. I'm Liam Halligan, and for the next hour, we'll be talking about scrapping the VAT on household energy bills. That's something On the Money's been campaigning for since January, and which former Chancellor Rishi Sunak has now finally accepted would be a good idea. We have an update on the train strike, and the government Small Business Commissioner's paying us another visit. And we get a policy update from one of Liz Truss's most prominent backers in the House of Commons. All that and more On the Money after the GB News headlines with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon, it's 1 o'clock. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date. Commuters are facing significant travel disruption across the country today as rail workers are on strike again. More than 40,000 members of the RMT union and 14 train operators have walked out in a long-running dispute over jobs, pay and conditions. Picket lines have been formed outside stations across the country. Network Rail says only 20% of services are running. Travellers have been urged not to travel unless absolutely necessary. The RMT General Secretary Mick Lynch told us that government cuts are to blame.
He wants massive cuts. When he wanted the railway workers to keep working and put themselves in a place of danger, in effect, he wanted to talk to us. Now he's using COVID and the effects of COVID as a reason to cut back on the railway. He's cut £2 billion worth of funding from the National Rail, and he's cutting £2 billion from London Underground, in effect. Now that's causing massive disruption, and it's that funding cut that he's responsible for that is causing these disputes. If we can get back to a proper funding level and he allows the companies to negotiate properly, we will get a settlement to this dispute. But he's got the key.
The Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps, told us he can't believe the attitude of the unions.
Every one of your viewers watching has paid £600 from their household to keep every railway worker in a job, not even on furlough, during the coronavirus. There are employers and there are unions. They're the only people who can settle these strikes. This is just a game they play in order to divert attention from the fact that they are the ones calling the strikes.
England are through to the Women's Euro 2022 final after beating Sweden 4-0. It was Beth Mead, Lucy Bronze, Alessia Russo and Fran Kirby who all scored. The Lionesses will now face either France or Germany in the final on Sunday at Wembley. MPs are accusing Rishi Sunak of making a U-turn after he pledged to cut VAT on domestic energy bills if he becomes Prime Minister. Unveiling his new winter plan to tackle inflation and the cost of living crisis, the former Chancellor said he'll scrap the VAT if the price cap exceeds £3,000. The announcement's been criticised as Mr Sunak's repeatedly accused Ms Truss of offering unfunded tax cuts. Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng told us he welcomes Sunak's change of heart.
The reason he's doing that is because he's under pressure. He knows that his tax-raising agenda isn't working. To me, it seems strange that anybody could aspire to the Tory leadership, essentially advocating tax rises, but that's up to him. But I think he suddenly realised that he's on very dodgy ground there and is now flipping back to saying that VAT should be abolished or reduced on energy bills. That's the fairy tale, and I think he's come very late to that party.
The Foreign Secretary is promising to publish police league tables if she wins the leadership race. Ms Truss will also ask forces to cut crime by 20% and, as she says, spend their time investigating real crimes, not Twitter rows and hurt feelings. Ms Truss said her government would make sure homicide, serious violence and neighbourhood crime are all reduced by a fifth by the end of this Parliament. The government's drive to recruit an extra 20,000 police officers in England and Wales by next March has slowed down considerably in the last 3 months. Home Office figures show 214 officers were recruited in the last 3 months. 2,500 extra officers have been recruited in the 3 months before that. That brings the total now to just over 13,500 officers. Recruiting additional police officers was a key pledge by the Conservatives in the 2019 general election, as they promised to cut crime across England and Wales. A McDonald's cheeseburger is no longer 99p. The fast food giants increased the price for the first time in more than 14 years, and they've blamed rising costs and inflation. It's now 20 pence more expensive, coming in at £1.19. In a statement, McDonald's says a number of items on sale in its UK restaurants will go up from anywhere between 10 to 20 pence. They're the latest company to announce increasing prices after inflation hit a 40-year high. This is GB News, and I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head to Liam for today's On the Money.
And coming up on the money today, scrap the VAT on household fuel bills, said On the Money, again and again and again. No, said Chancellor Rishi Sunak. But now, having resigned from the Treasury and struggling to stay in this Tory leadership contest, Sunak has finally relented. But how much is it worth? Does it make sense? And will it happen? On the Money examines the prospect of scrapping VAT on household energy bills. Meanwhile, more than 40,000 members of the RMT union working at Network Rail and 14 train operators are on strike today across the UK over pay cuts, pensions and hours. Is there an end of this travel chaos in sight? Plus, we've invited back the government's Small Business Commissioner to answer questions from GB News viewers and listeners. Are you a small business owner struggling with late payments or tax? Email me your questions and I'll put them to Liz Barkley live on air. Plus, every day on The Money features an in-depth Money Talks interview. Today we meet Mark Francois MP, one of Liz Truss's most prominent backers in the House of Commons. What would a Truss government do policy-wise? We hear from a political insider. That's later in the show. So email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, with your questions and your thoughts on how the issues we've discussed impact you. And stay with us, because this is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and you're on The Money. Now, Now, back in early January, On the Money could see that the cost of living crisis was building. This was before the war in Ukraine, of course, and the resulting spike in energy prices on global markets. But even then, inflation and household utility bills were heading sharply up. And that's why, on the 10th of January 2022, drum roll, On the Money launched the GBNews Scrap the VAT campaign on household fuel bills. If it matters to you, it matters to us, as I said at the time. And I've repeated my calls for Rishi Sunak to make this move here on The Money and elsewhere on GB News ever since. Now Sunak's under enormous pressure in this Tory leadership contest. And having resigned as Chancellor, helping to spark this leadership battle, he's trailing Liz Truss in the contest to attract the votes of Tory activists across the country, those who'll decide who gets the keys to number 10. Truss has put forward £30 billion worth of immediate tax cuts, including reversing Sunak's rise in national insurance and corporation tax. The former Chancellor, meanwhile, has maintained that tax cuts would be irresponsible. Until now. Responding to my original campaign, Sunak argued that scrapping the VAT on household utility bills would, quote, disproportionately benefit wealthier households. But that ignores the reality that poorer families pay a much higher share of their household income on energy, so a VAT cut would really help them. The former Chancellor has also argued that tax cuts are inflationary, making the cost of living crisis worse. Really? Making the price of a necessity cheaper by removing the VAT surely brings inflation down. VAT on fuel set at 5%. This coming October, fuel bills are expected to rocket to an average of more than £3,000 a year. So removing the VAT would save around £160. Rishi Sunak's already given £400 of assistance to help with household fuel bills, more for the most vulnerable. But for those struggling, scrapping the VAT as well would be more than welcome. On the Money salutes Sunak for changing his mind. But having placed the highest tax burden on Britain in 70 years and refusing tax cuts until now, the former Chancellor has probably blown his chances of the top job. But that's not to say he won't be in a future government and that this policy won't happen. We'll have to see. But meanwhile, the question remains. Is Rishi Sunak's VAT scrapping pledge too little, too late? Grown-up conversation with people who know their stuff. That's what we do here on The Money. And joining me on the show is Howard Cox. He's CEO of Fair Fuel UK. Gerard Lyons, Dr. Gerard Lyons, Chief Economic Strategist for Netwealth, former Chief Economic Advisor to Boris Johnson. And with me in the studio, it's Justin Urquhart-Stewart, our own Gordon Gekko, on The Money regular. He is co-founder of Regionally. Howard, let's go to you first. Now, it's always great to have you on the show, even though for the most part you've been campaigning, haven't you, to scrap duty on petrol and diesel, so transport fuels. Today's move, to be clear, or today's pledge from Rishi Sunak if he becomes Prime Minister, is to scrap VAT on household utilities. So it's different. But I wanted to hear from you today, Howard, because this is clearly the kind of move that you want to see, and no doubt is as a result of pressure from campaigners similar to you.
You're absolutely right. And congratulations, Liam. Well, you started the ball rolling on this one. But it does smack of desperation because he's been fighting this whole point of any tax cut for ages, even to the extent we heard from Bloomberg that he was going to put taxes up on diesel and petrol, green taxes. So I'm delighted it's happening, and I think it's a little too late. You're absolutely right. And he won't get elected. I just hope that Liz Truss actually follows his lead and does this. But it's vital that he does this because the cost of living crisis is getting worse by the day. And I want to see this scrapping of VAT or a cut in fuel duty or both, obviously, on filling up our cars.
Gerry Lyons, great to have you on the show as ever. Chancellor or former Chancellor Sunak is saying this would be a one-off measure for a year. It would cost somewhere between £4 and £5 billion. It's not an ideal policy, but it is quite an eye-catching policy, isn't it? Was he right to do this, Gerry?
Well, yes, it's not too little, too late. It's necessary now. Obviously, Rishi Sunak is not in a position to actually implement this, but I think it's important that he has shifted his stance because it fits with my thinking and the thinking of some other economists that timely and targeted tax cuts are affordable, they're necessary, and they're not inflationary. So not only will I agree with what Rishi Sunak has proposed, I would actually also suggest, as indeed Penny Mordaunt, for instance, suggested during the campaign, halving, for instance, VAT at the pumps on petrol. That would knock 16p off the litre. So there are other things that we could do. Liz Truss has said temporarily suspend the green levy. All of these measures are important. They mitigate the impact of higher fuel prices. And also importantly, they not only help people with the cost of living crisis, they reduce costs in the supply chain. And that's very important.
Justin, in the studio, while temperamentally a tax cutter, I think it's fair to say, you're not quite sure this is the right policy, are you?
Well, it's a change, and that's good. But actually, see what's happened over the past couple of days. We saw Rishi actually behaving badly in the previous television talk, behaving very undiplomatically. Remember, his audience are Tory members. This is not a general election. So actually what to do is try and persuade what the average Conservative voter looks like.
Yeah.
So, yes, is this actually going to be the right way? It's part of it. But nothing is coordinated with this. It's sort of almost sort of one-off bits, and he's seen to be flip-flopping all over the place. No, that's not. He's not going to win this election if he carries on like this, either because of his behaviour or because he keeps on changing his policies. But there are things you can do if you actually just want to encourage that Conservative votership, which is play to where the successes are. This is where Britain is good. This is what we should be focusing on. It's incredibly negative, all of this. Hardly surprising. So, yes, he's handing money back. We can afford to because they got an extra fillip coming through with the extra income because of the fuel tax. But now actually be much more targeted on it, and you'll get, I think, a better message from those potential voters.
Howard Cox, Justin mentioned there we have got a bit of so-called fiscal headroom, haven't we? A bit of breathing space in the budget because higher inflation means that the government gets more VAT. Higher fuel prices that you've been fixated on means that the government gets more fuel duty. Do you want to see a similar headline policy move from Rishi Sunak on fuel for cars and hauliers and so on petrol and diesel? Because he isn't going to be the next Prime Minister on current thinking. That may change. There's a bit of time to go yet. But most likely he won't be. But he could no doubt be in Liz Truss's government. What do you think he should be saying on fuel in terms of petrol and diesel, Howard?
Well, absolutely. I mean, Penny Mordaunt, I supported Penny Mordaunt for the simple fact she was thinking about probably the easiest deflationary tool at the moment is to either cut duty or cut VAT or petrol and diesel filling up. Germany have done it. They've cut it by 25p per litre. Spain 20, Ireland 17 and France 13p. We cut it by 5p, which didn't even touch the size. It wasn't seen. And even the recent Competitions and Market Authority inquiry, which was a complete whitewash, said that it was passed on. I can guarantee you it wasn't. The RAC said only 2p was passed on. This is hurting at the moment, and this is the perfect time to actually put a cut in fuel duty to help motorists. It helps hauliers. Half of a haulier's bill is something like 45 to 50% are fuel costs, and it's crippling these businesses, and they're becoming less viable. And some of them are going to go to the wall unless something is done about the cost of fuel.
Jerry, just briefly before we go to the break, Howard's put his finger on there, a key issue that many viewers and listeners will be thinking about. If you cut the VAT on a price, that VAT cut still has to be passed on, doesn't it, by the supplier? The supplier could otherwise increase their margin. And that not only applies on petrol forecourts across the country, it also applies to the household utility bills that we're sent by our energy providers, right?
Yeah. Well, I read that Competition and Markets Authority review 2 weeks ago. I thought it was good, and it did argue that all the 5p cut, 6p including the VAT on petrol prices, was passed on. And I tended to take it at face value, and I used that to further support my argument. And indeed, I was advising Penny Mordaunt at the time that VAT should be reduced on fuel. Halved indeed. But I think the important thing is here that when one looks at fiscal policy, there is headroom, and it's important to stress, and I think Rishi Sunak has now accepted this, that tax cuts, if timely and if targeted, make a lot of sense.
Well, thanks for that, Jerry. We're going to carry on this discussion after the break. Howard Cox, we say goodbye to you. For now, we're bringing in some more voices. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. We will keep this discussion going on this crucial question of VAT on fuel bills. Your emails are flooding in thick and fast, and I'll read out some of those shortly as well. Stay with us. You're on the money.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. It's 1:19. You're on the money. We're discussing Rishi Sunak's screeching U-turn. Scrap the VAT on household energy bills, we told the Chancellor. And now, as an ex-Chancellor, Sunak finally agrees. Let's discuss this more with Greg Marsh. Greg, welcome to the show. You are the founder of Nous making a return. That is a cost of living forecast service. Tell us about what's going to happen in October when this new off-gem energy price cap kicks in. We're hearing about average household fuel bills above £3,000. Could that happen based on current wholesale prices? And if it did, do you think it's a good idea to scrap VAT on those household utility bills?
So, Liam, thanks for having me back. The £3,000 is pretty much locked in now. The way that the energy price cap is set, it's based on what's already happened for the most part. So, unfortunately, that one is bad news. That's just a matter of time before that hits us. To put Rishi Sunak's U-turn or new proposals in context, about 5% of your energy bill is VAT, which means that this 5% saving is equivalent to about £150, somewhere between £150 and £200, depending on what happens over the next 6 to 12 months to fuel prices and energy prices. So that's real money. That's another £150 to £200 in the pocket of a typical household, or £13 a month or thereabouts. So that's real money. But again, it's a small proportion or small fraction of the scale of the increase. And I'm afraid that every silver lining has a cloud. We've also heard this morning from one of the leading energy consulting firms that the best guess that they now have as to what's going to happen to energy prices in January. So remember, we have a price increase that we're going to see in October, and then we're going to see a further price increase in January, 3 months later. That their new estimate for that price increase, because of recent increases in the wholesale price of gas due to the war, is that it's going to double from where it is now to reach nearly £4,000. Now, we don't know that number for sure, but that is a shocker. You think Christmas is expensive most years, your January fuel bill, just for January, that's a cold month of the year where you're turning your energy up to heat the house, Your January fuel bill for a typical UK family could be as high as £500 just for that month of January. Now, that for me is a real shock. And again, that puts into context the £150 to £200 that Rishi Sunak's proposed VAT relief, and Truss is committed to the same principle. That £150 to £200 of savings, it's only going to go a small portion of the way to compensate families for the increased costs that they are very likely to face.
Jerry Lyons, this is getting silly, isn't it? I mean, Greg Marsh is citing there the estimates of respected industry forecasters. I mean, how high can these fuel bills go? In the end, I know you wouldn't advocate this for 1 second, and nor would I, but it strikes me that you're going to get people refusing to pay their energy bills at those kind of levels. Not just refusing, utterly unable to pay their energy bills.
That's right. We currently have two problems in the UK economy: higher inflation and weakening domestic demand, with consumer confidence at rock bottom levels already. Higher fuel prices, as just outlined, will exacerbate both of those pressures. That means that the policy stance needs to continue to respond to this. And it's inevitable that whoever wins the leadership election, but let's assume it's Liz Truss, and she's already indicated this, they as new Prime Minister, will have to take proactive action. That means basically getting money to those people on low incomes. In fact, I would suggest it needs to also be across the whole income spectrum, even to the squeeze middle. Now, it might be tax cuts, but more likely in terms of this, it will have to be direct expenditure transfers. Doesn't necessarily mean a check in the post, because people will then say that's spent on other things, so be it. But I think there will have to be measures to actually offset the impact of this. Remember, part of this is the consequence of the war in Ukraine and sanctions. So therefore, one has to be sort of aware of the sort of policy implications of taking those actions against Russia on the sanction side. Also, the fact that continental countries are still buying energy from Russia exacerbates the whole process. So whichever way you look at it, when we look at fiscal policy, you need three further things. First, that direct help to those people in difficulty, and that may be of the order of another £1,200 as already so far this year, but more directed. There will have to be, in my mind, further reductions in tax on fuel. And third, then there needs to be a revisiting in an October or September budget of corporation tax, of the national insurance tax, and of income tax allowances. This requires a major fiscal action on behalf of the new Prime Minister.
Justin, Jerry Lyons is a very respected economist. He doesn't just say things for the sake of it. He's outlined there a package of measures. I would say we need to go further. Don't we need to be making contingency plans for possible, energy shocks, possible blackouts? Shouldn't we be firing up our coal-fired power stations at this point? And this is before we even talk about the geopolitics of Russia doing what the European Commission now says it's likely to do, which is cutting off the gas to Germany.
And this is a perfect example of this. When people say, we didn't see it coming. Yes, you can. It's coming our way. We know roughly how much. And also it could, as you say, other factors get considerably worse. Unfortunately, what's happened is you're getting lots of little extra cuts and bonuses coming towards you. But for most people, they don't understand it. It's all just itchy bit. Where's the policy? What Gerard outlined there was a series of elements which logically linked together. And that you say, that's a policy I can understand, the direction. That comes back to that word for the economy, confidence.
And worth saying, the VAT cut, if it happens, wouldn't apply in Northern Ireland under current rules, because they are still ostensibly in the EU single market. And the VAT rules there mean that we can't do precisely what we want, it's worth saying.
So, this is making sure that there's a properly joined-up, coordinated idea. And the problem with this, the Tories make themselves look so stupid. It's about washing doing your washing in the daylight. No, this is on stage, in colour, anytime you like it. They're looking silly. But at the time when they need to be building that confidence. And there are some good things to say. There are some things we can actually try and build on, the technology companies and things like that. So give the voters, they're Tory voters, a clear, simple message they can hang on to. Both characters in this are thoroughly unreliable in their history in terms of what their voting history has been like. So they've got to come over with something else to actually say, here is my logical plan. I cannot see that from either of them at the moment.
Justin Urquhart-Stewart, co-founder of Regionally. Great to have you on the show as ever. Indeed, Jerry Lyons, Chief Economic Strategist at NetWealth, and also Greg Marsh of Nous, which is a cost of living forecasting service. An important discussion, the first of many more that we should be having on household energy bills. Now, our summer of travel chaos continues with another day of rail strikes today. Train services are operating at around 20% of full capacity countrywide. Some 40,000 RMT union workers at Network Rail and 14 train companies have walked out, disrupting the plans of tens of thousands of would-be passengers. GB News asked Mick Lynch, Secretary-General of the RMT, why this strike was happening.
Well, we've got the same issues that are in the dispute. We've got a threat to jobs. We want a guarantee of no compulsory redundancies. The companies want to make thousands of job cuts. We've got massive changes to our terms and conditions. They want to rip up most of our agreements and dilute our terms and conditions and put us on worse agreements. They haven't given us a pay deal. We haven't had a pay rise for 2 or 3 years in most cases. And in the train operators, they want to dilute our pension arrangements and make us pay more and get less in retirement. So big issues.
Mick Lynch there of the RMT, and as it happens, former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn. He's given Mick Lynch and the RMT his full support.
Today to support the rail workers. They are faced with job losses, insufficient pay and insecurity in the future. That can't be right. They've taken a vote by an overwhelming majority to authorise the union to call strike action. They've done that today and I'm here to support them. Because in reality, the RMT today is speaking for an awful lot of other people who are worried about their own future, about their jobs and about low levels of pay in this country at a time of very high inflation.
Jeremy Corbyn there on the picket line with RMT members at Central London's Euston Station. Well, GB News South West reporter Jeff Moody is joining us live from Bristol Temple Meads, one of the busiest stations, of course, in the South West. Jeff, good to have you here on The Money.
Well, busiest train station in the southwest indeed, but not today. 20% of the service is running as normal. So some people are coming in and out of Bristol Temple Meads, but not that many. And crucially, today it is impossible to get to Cornwall by rail. The county is now completely cut off from the rest of the country. Well, I'm joined now by Nikki Hughes from Network Rail. Nikki, the government has blamed very militant unions for what it says is a completely unnecessary strike. Is that how you see it?
No, it's not how we see it. We are really keen to get back around the table with the RMT to do an important pay deal and also agree ways in which we can modernise the railway for the UK.
When it comes to the West Country, when it comes to Cornwall in particular, no trains today are going any further west than Exeter. Why is that? And what are you doing for people that want to get down to Cornwall today?
Well, I mean, firstly, let me say we're really sorry for anybody who was trying to travel by train to Cornwall today. Unfortunately, we can't run services past Exeter because we simply don't have signallers available to signal the trains from Exeter down to Penzance or any of the branch lines in Cornwall. So our message to anybody trying to travel by train today to Cornwall is to either find an alternative way to travel or travel tomorrow.
What about replacement bus services?
There are no replacement bus services available today because of the extent of the industrial action across the UK. So again, the message to travellers and rail passengers, which we're very sorry for, is to avoid travelling if you have to, and if you do have to travel by train, please check the times of the trains and check the times of the last trains available today because services stop running a lot earlier than they normally do.
Nikki Hughes, thank you very much indeed for that. Well, you've heard the message there. They're very sorry. There's nothing they can do if you're heading down to Cornwall. Try and stay at home if you possibly can.
Jeff Moody there at Bristol Temple Meads. Jeff, good to have you on the show. Now, coming up, it's today's Money Talks interview, and we're with Mark Francois, Tory MP for Rayleigh and Wickford in Essex. He backed Liz Truss as Tory leader and Prime Minister, despite their previous disagreements over Brexit. So what does Mark Francois think is in store from a Liz Truss administration? That's after the GB News headlines with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon, it's 1:32. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. Commuters are facing significant travel disruption across the country today as rail workers go on strike again. More than 40,000 members of the RMT union and 14 train operators have walked out in a long-running dispute over jobs, pay and conditions. Picket lines have been formed outside stations across the country. Network Rail says only 20% of services are running. Some places have no trains at all. England are through to the Women's Euro 2022 final after beating Sweden 4-0 at Bramall Lane. It was Beth Mead, Lucy Bronze, Alicia Russo and Fran Kirby who all scored. The Lionesses will now face either France or Germany in the final on Sunday at Wembley. The government's drive to recruit an extra 20,000 police officers in England and Wales by next March has slowed down considerably in the last 3 months. Home Office figures show 214 officers were recruited in the last 3 months. If we compare that to the 2,500 extra officers recruited in the 3 months before that, that brings the total now to just over 13,500 officers. The Met Office says this month has been the driest July for England since 1911. That is 111 years. Only 24% of the rain that would be expected for this month has fallen. The Environment Agency is urging people to use water wisely as the country could face a drought in August if the hot and dry weather continues. A McDonald's cheeseburger is no longer 99p. The fast food giant has increased the price for the first time in more than 14 years, blaming rising costs and inflation. It's now 20 pence more expensive, coming in at £1.19. In a statement, McDonald's says a number of items on sale in its UK restaurants will go up from anything from 10 to 20 pence. It's the latest company to announce increasing prices after inflation has hit a 40-year high. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will pay you $1.206 and 1.189 euros. The price of gold currently stands at £1,427.11 per ounce.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for real-time investment.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV, on radio,
on digital, absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
And welcome back, it's 1:36. Now, small businesses are the lifeblood of the British economy. So said Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng last week after announcing the extension of a scheme offering government-backed loans to small and medium-sized enterprises, or SMEs, for another 2 years. Accounting for half our commercial activity and employing 2/3 of our workforce, many of Britain's SMEs have been struggling lately off the back of lockdown and worldwide supply chain cost pressures. So it's good to welcome back the Government Small Business Commissioner, Liz Barclay, for you to put your questions to right here on The Money. Liz, thanks for joining me today. Great to see you. We've had lots of emails in recent days and even since the top of the hour asking you many questions. The first one we picked was from Vicky. How can I chase late payments without damaging employer relationships? It's such a difficult one, this, isn't it?
This goes right to the heart of the problem. And I have to say, we're dealing with small businesses, micro businesses, freelancers, sole traders, not the SMEs necessarily, because they're a bit too big.
They go up to sort of 250 employees.
Exactly. And the needs of everybody's different. And when you're a small business, that business relationship is the most important thing for you, because that's your customer, that's where you're going to get your next lot of work from. And I've been as guilty as everybody else of saying, this is a life-changing piece of work, I'm going to accept it, and not thinking about, am I going to get paid for it? So think ahead is the best way to manage the relationship. Think ahead, know exactly when the payment's going to come in, know when to put your invoice.
Get your payments staged,
agree yes, you can do that. You can
a table of payments depending on how far you've got down the project.
Or you can ask for help with materials up front if you need that. But damaging the relationship is the thing that worries people most. And that's why they won't negotiate better terms, but it's also why they won't chase up those late payments. So if the payment doesn't come in at the time that it's supposed to come in, you have to be brave and you do have to chase them up. Do the paperwork in advance, get better terms negotiated, get it all in
Communication.
writing. Communication is always the key to this.
As in any relationship, right?
Build the relationship. Find out who the person is that you need to talk to, who pays you. Because quite often I've assumed it's the person who's given me the work and it turns out it's not.
Yeah, that's right.
So you need to build the relationship beforehand and make it impossible for them to go home on a Friday afternoon without having paid you, because they like you.
Now, Matt's asked me a question about you, Liz Barclay, because he said, what does the Small Business Commissioner do, and can I reach out directly as a small business owner?
Yes, you can reach out directly, Matt. What I do and what my team do are not necessarily the same thing. I do a lot of talking to small businesses, big businesses, lots of organisations. The team takes your cases, so they talk to Vicky. And if Vicky were to ring or email us with a late payment problem, we will reach out to you, find out what the details of the situation are. In fact, I've just had a LinkedIn request from somebody who has contacted me directly just as I was waiting to come on the programme. And I am saying, we need the details, we need to talk to you, we need to find out who your customer is, and we can intervene on your behalf if you want us to. If you don't want us to, we can give you all the information you need to help you to resolve the dispute yourself.
Now, of course, you've got a very distinguished track record as a campaigning journalist. You're very well versed in business and personal finance in particular, the centre of your journalism and broadcasting over the years. Here's a question from Marianne. How prevalent is late payments among small businesses in the UK? And I think that's a really relevant one. Were you surprised at the extent of it when you took this new job, despite your previous experience?
I think not, because this is something we've been talking about for 30 years. The first time we did a radio programme on one of those other networks out there 30-odd years ago, Justin Urquhart-Stewart was involved at that stage too. We were told that late payments was the biggest issue. And we're still hearing from small businesses. Unfortunately, the cost of doing business is now the biggest problem, the skills shortage, and then late payments. But it's still there. However, by what we meant by late then and what we meant by late now is slightly different. On average, invoices were being paid within 82 days then.
Right.
And now they're being paid on average within 36 days.
So it has got systemically better.
Technology has really helped.
Yeah.
You know, so all the cloud accounting,
fewer postal delays,
all of that kind of thing. But there's still a problem, still too many people getting paid late. And what we are beginning to hear is big businesses spending a lot of money making their processes better so they can pay their small suppliers within 30 days. But the small suppliers are so desperate to get that money in that they're coming to their bigger customers and saying, can you pay us quicker? We need to be paid within 14 days, 7 days even, because we need the cash flow, because we've got so much going out for fuel and electricity, materials, wages, that we don't know that we're going to be here the next time you need it.
And of course, in an inflationary environment, if you have to wait longer to get your cash,
of course,
the value of the cash when you get it is worth less.
Yes, absolutely. But if you have to borrow to bridge the gap because you haven't got the cash in and you've got a gap while you're waiting for payments to come in, it's costing you more because the interest rates are going up.
Well, Liz, I know, having followed your work over many years, that you feel personally really invested in this campaign and in your work. And obviously, you're now the Government Small Business Commissioner. So this is very important discussions. We'll keep talking about this subject, and I look forward to welcoming you back.
I'm passionate about small businesses.
To the On The Money studio.
I want to see our small businesses do well, flourish and survive. And they are the talent that's driving the success of bigger businesses. Come on, bigger businesses. Don't forget that.
Well said. Very well said. Liz Barclay there, the Government Small Business Commissioner, answering your questions exclusively here on The Money. And as Arnie Schwarzenegger said, she'll be back. Well, it seems harder than ever before to get onto the property ladder. The average UK house price is more than 350 quid. That's 10% up over the last year alone. Well, tomorrow, the Office for National Statistics releases new figures on housing affordability and disposable incomes. And ahead of those numbers, we sent East Midlands reporter Will Hollis to meet a 104-year-old great-great-grandmother. She's lived in her entire life in the same Nottinghamshire home.
Elsie Alcock has lived a very full life, 104 years to be precise, and every minute of it she's been right here on Barker Street in Huthwaite. Born upstairs in June 1918, before the end of the First World War, she's made a lifetime of memories here.
Oh, that's me on backyard with my first 2 grandchildren.
Living with her son Raymond, who's 75, Elsie knows every inch of the home, so much so that she can walk around in the dark.
He always says when I'm going upstairs, put a light on, Mother. What for? It's funny, but I can't every step I go up.
Elsie's coal miner dad first rented the Nottinghamshire home for 7 shillings and 6pence, and when he died, Elsie and her husband Bill decided to buy it. The cost was £250, money they didn't have, but the local council helped the couple with the cash. Elsie still has the book she used to pay off the 10-year loan.
CWA Alcock and E Alcock. Monthly payment was £2.16 and a penny.
In today's money, Elsie paid about £5,000 for the house, but if she sold it now, the 2-bed terraced house would fetch around £80,000. Housing is one of Britain's biggest challenges. The government needs to build 300,000 new homes a year, but is falling short. Prices are soaring. Low stock is one of the reasons for the rise. This week, the Office for National Statistics is releasing its figures for housing affordability, analysing prices and income. Near to where Elsie lives, the District Council is trying to replenish its social housing stock. But Councillor Tom Hollis says the right to buy scheme, which means tenants can eventually buy their council homes, makes the task challenging.
All this estate was built by the council. Now we have less than 40%. You know, and 22,000 houses across Ashfield has now become less than 7,000 directly owned by the council. Yet we've still got just the same demand. You know, we want to give those people good places to rent. But when somebody can buy the house, you lose that stock forever.
In June, Boris Johnson promised to extend the right to buy scheme. His resignation and a new Prime Minister may alter those plans. Back on Barker Street, Elsie's home becomes worth more every day, but the memories she's made here are priceless. Will Hollis for GB News in the East Midlands.
Wonderful. Will Hollis there with Nottinghamshire's finest. Now it's time for my daily interview series. That's Money Talks. And today we're interviewing somebody who's not from the world of business and commerce, as is usual, because in the midst of this Tory leadership contest, we need to keep a handle on the possible direction of government policies that affect us all. Mark Francois is Tory MP for Rayleigh and Wickford in Essex, and he's a leading member of the European Research Group of MPs who are so instrumental, the history shows, in getting Brexit through the House of Commons. Mark, though, and much of the ERG has backed Liz Truss as Tory leader and Prime Minister, even though the Foreign Secretary, prior to the Brexit referendum, campaigned for Remain. A former Defence Minister and shadow Treasury spokesman, Mark Francois is known for his grasp of policy. So what kind of policies, beyond tax, does he think a future Prime Minister Truss might come up with? So here he is, Mark Francois MP, my latest guest on Money Talks. Great to have you in the studio here for Money Talks. We've talked in the past a lot, haven't we, about a whole range of economic policy issues, not least housing. And I know we've just seen there and a wonderful package, I thought, from Will Hollis about a lady from Nottinghamshire who bought her own council house. Your family bought your own council house. And I know you felt that was transformational for your family.
It was.
What will Liz Truss come up with when it comes to housing? A really crucial issue now for your party to grasp.
Well, I've been a Member of Parliament for 21 years, and on this whole very controversial issue about housing and development, one of the things I've learned from experience, Liam, is that housing development is something you have to do with people rather than to people. And so I'm really excited by the fact that Liz promised on the front page of the Sunday Telegraph recently to abolish what she described as Stalinist housing targets. This is the system whereby bureaucrats in Whitehall assign to a local authority a number of thousands of houses and they have to build within their boundaries in a certain given period, even though the bureaucrats may have no familiarity at all with the area or indeed the infrastructure problems that they face. So what Liz is saying is that if she becomes Prime Minister, those targets will be abolished. We still need to build houses, but we'll do it bottom up by using neighbourhood plans, which is where communities come together and decide for themselves where housing should go, because those people have got kids who need houses to live in too, rather than a top-down Soviet-style solution where it's all given to you from the centre. If I wanted to summarise it, there was an old saying from the war, the man in Whitehall knows best. Well, often he doesn't, but I believe the locally elected Tory councillor probably knows better, and Liv's policy is to put her faith in them rather than in bureaucrats in Whitehall.
That's a policy debate that will run on and on, and we will return to that, obviously.
But I do think, it will be very popular with Tory councillors,
sure,
most of whom hate these targets because they have the effect of setting one community off against each other. And now you'd ask each of the communities to decide how many houses they think they can logically accommodate given the infrastructure pressures that they've got. So I really think this is a vote winner among Tory councillors at grassroots, but we'll see.
What about more broadly? What would a Truss administration do? We know she's highlighting lower tax. She's putting, if you like, clear blue water between herself and Rishi Sunak on tax. I guess that's why the ERG, not necessarily her natural colleagues and supporters, with all respect, is that really what's attracted you and your ERG colleagues to the idea of a Liz Truss leadership?
Well, ultimately, every member of the ERG will make their own decision.
Sure.
But I think the bulk of us have been attracted to support Liz. We trust her on Europe. I know that she voted Remain. We all know that. But if you look at the development of the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill, there was a big row in government. She and Suella Braverman kept trying to toughen the bill up. Rishi Sunak and others kept trying to water it down. So that, if you like, was Liz's bona fides for us, and also the fact she negotiated over 70 trade deals. She even set the groundwork for these new deals with Australia and New Zealand that Anne-Marie Trevelyan is now bringing very successfully to fruition. So, do I trust Liz Truss on Europe? Yes. And even if you won't take it from me, if Bill Cash, John Redwood, Ian Duncan Smith, David Jones and Steve Baker trust her on Europe, then that's good enough for me, and I think for the bulk of my colleagues in the ERG.
You know her pretty well. What are her instincts, Mark, across other areas of public policy? We also obviously know a lot about her foreign policy views and ideas because she's Foreign Secretary. But beyond that, where else do you think she may make her mark? And who could be her Chancellor?
Well, if she becomes Prime Minister, that's well above my pay grade. but what I would say is that I think that, Liz believes the democratically elected politician should run the country, not the blob, right? And I haven't come here to do lots of knocking copy on Rishi, but he is a bit of a prisoner of the Treasury mandarins, and we see all of that in the tax debate, to be honest. By the way, he's done this big flip-flop about VAT.
It's damaged him, really, isn't it?
I think because he spent 3 weeks lecturing us all on fiscal probity and all the rest of it, to now suddenly advocate a £4 billion tax cut looks a little bit, quirky. And, of course, that wouldn't apply in Northern Ireland under the Northern Ireland Protocol. It's Liz's bill. She would get rid of that difference so that Northern Ireland would be treated the rest. It was Rishi and the Treasury mandarins who wanted to keep the difference. So I, put it this way, I believe that the Prime Minister should give the civil servants the orders and not the other way around. And if Liz Truss is giving the orders, we all know who's in charge. I think if it's Rishi, there'd be a question about, is he really giving the orders or the Treasury mandarins? I mean, no disrespect, that's partly based on track record.
And what else? What other aspects of policy do you think are of interest to her? For instance, we were speaking earlier in the show about the real bad energy crisis that we're going to see this autumn, possibly going into January. Bills not just £3,000 a year, but even £4,000 a year, some industry insiders are now saying.
Well, that's, for instance, why Liz has said that she would temporarily suspend the green levies on people's energy bills. It's not that she's not committed to 2050. She is. I mean, it's in law. But I think, given the cost of living crisis, it's a sensible decision to temporarily suspend those green levies to actually, relieve some of the financial pressure on, hard-working families that your package earlier, was so clearly making apparent. And look, her instincts are to be a tax cutter. I mean, there's a few people around Rishi who've never heard of the Laffer curve, and if they have, they probably think it's
the idea that if you lower a tax rate, you can actually get more revenue because you get more growth.
Yeah, I think some of his supporters think that's a corner at Brands Hatch, and she's an instinctive tax cutter, and that goes through. And I think we can afford to do it her way because her argument is, and I have sympathy with this, is we need to grow our way out of the pandemic. You can't tax your way out, right? And the IMF is saying at the moment that we've got such a tax burden that next year we'd be the slowest growing major economy in the Western world. We can't afford that. We've got to get growth. We've got to give it a boost, and that means targeted tax cuts. For instance, she wants to keep corporation tax at 19%. Rishi's policy is to increase it to 25%. What does that
was in his budget, isn't it? In 2023.
Yeah, and well, he's not flip-flopped on that one yet, but we've got a few weeks to go. And what that would mean is, A, you reduce the profits of British companies that makes it more difficult for them to invest and to grow jobs. And secondly, also very importantly, it's a disincentive to international companies who can invest pretty much anywhere on earth to invest in the UK if they're going to see 6% more of their revenue immediately go in tax to the Treasury. So my worry is that by sticking to sort of Treasury orthodoxy, we will delay growth. We could even push the economy into recession. Liz wants targeted tax cuts to really give the economy a rocket boost growth, and then, as the Laffer curve says, you get more tax revenue at the end of the day anyway. So I'm absolutely convinced that must be the right way to go. And I think even Rishi, to be fair, is hesitating. Hence this sort of flip-flop on VAT.
Now, we've seen these TV debates. We're going to see more. Of course, last night's debate was curtailed. The presenter on Talk TV, Kate McCann, unfortunately fainted.
But we understand she's OK now.
Well, we wish everyone at GB News wishes her well. Many of us know her. But very, very briefly, Mark, is this good for the Tory brand, this blue-on-blue conflict?
Well, I've tried to make my comments measured because at the end of the day, Liam, here's a contest. Right? Like, the job of the parliamentary party was to narrow this down to two credible potential prime ministers. We've done that. They could both be prime minister. The question is, which is the best? I believe it's Liz for some of the reasons that I've given you. But at the end of it, we have to knit this back together. And we all have to come together as a party and then turn our guns on Keir Starmer and Labour, not least because we don't want to live in an era of trade union militancy, which is what we're beginning to see rear its head again at the moment. So whoever wins, and I hope it's the best woman for the job, but whoever wins, at the end of the day, we all form ranks again, and we all take the Labour Party on full on, and of course their fellow travellers and the Liberal Democrats and the SNP.
Mark Francois, good to get your insights into the prospects for a Truss administration. Mark Francois, the Tory MP for Rayleigh and Wickford in Essex, our latest guest on Money Talks. That's all we've got time for today. You can join me at 1 p.m. tomorrow for more on the money. This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and for now, that was On the Money.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Dry for most today, but it does turn increasingly cloudy, and there will be the odd shower, however, for the vast majority. High pressure is keeping things settled. That high pressure now centred across the UK. That means lighter winds compared with earlier in the week, and we started the day with plenty of sunshine. It was a fresh start following a clear night, but the cloud is already starting to build. We've got medium cloud moving in from the southwest, and also areas of cloud developing inland, and so with that cloud thickening up, always the chance of the odd shower, say for the Midlands, the southeast, more especially northern Scotland. But for the vast majority, it is going to stay dry. We'll see some bright spells. 24 in London, 18 to 19 for Glasgow, Edinburgh and Belfast. And then into the evening, the cloud thins and breaks in southern and northern areas, but in central parts, so for parts of North Wales, the North Midlands, Northern England and eventually Northern Ireland, we'll see the cloud thicken and some outbreaks of rain will turn up. That rain fairly showery, but it will be some heavy bursts in places, and it will keep the temperatures a bit higher compared with the previous night. Still, potential for some single-figure temperatures as we start off Thursday in the south and the north, but in between, areas of cloud, showers moving across northern England into southern Scotland as well. The rain tending to ease later, brighter skies coming along, and temperatures still reaching the mid-20s in the south, high teens and around 20 Celsius at best for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Further showers drifting north into central and southern Scotland during Thursday evening. Clear spells breaking out for Northern Ireland, Wales, central and southern England, as well as the far north of Scotland. And then Friday brings with it further showers in the north and west. And Saturday and Sunday it turns warmer in the south.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV. On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hello and welcome to We Need to Talk About on GB News with me, Alex Phillips, where we get stuck into the day's big issues that need looking at in depth. Nothing is off the table and no one will be